Hello, everyone. When I was teaching a course called The Greeks, I used to end it with a section of Louis MacNeice Autumn Journal, in which he talks about his own education in the classics. I like it partly because I think Louis MacNeice is a much underrated poet, but also because it um, has a lot of references that I used to say to the students. See how many of these you now understand after a term that you wouldn't have got at the beginning of the class. Um, Now I don't do the Greeks anymore because that's been replaced by a new course called Ancient Civilizations, where we do the Greeks and the Romans. So I had to get rid of various things, including Louis MacNeice, and that means I don't get the opportunity of reading out the section of Autumn Journal at the end of the class. So it's something I kind of enjoy. So I thought I'd do it here. I think you can get the text online, but I don't know if there's another reading of this section on YouTube at any rate. So this is written in the months heading into the start of the Second World War. Louis MacNeice, in case you don't know, was a Northern Irish and then English. He lived most of his life in England. Poet, critic, various other things. And among those other things, he was actually a classics lecturer at Birmingham. He was hired by E.R. Dodds, the great later professor of Greek at Oxford, who wrote The Greeks and the Irrational, and E.R. Dodds later edited actually this volume, the collected poems of Louis MacNeice. So the poem Autumn Journal is in various sections describing various aspects of MacNeice's life during this period, and he has various flashbacks, various memories, and one of these concerns, as I say, is education in the classics. So I'll read that. In section 9. Now we are back to normal. Now the mind is back to the even tenor of the usual day, skidding no longer across the uneasy camber of the nightmare way. We are safe, though others have crashed the railings over the river ravine. Their wheel tracks carve the bank, but after the event all we can do is argue and count the widening ripples where they sank. October comes with rain whipping round the ankles in waves of white at night and filling the raw clay trenches. The parks of London are a nasty sight. In a week I return to work, lecturing, coaching, as impresario of the ancient Greeks, who wore the chiton and lived on fish and olives, and talked philosophy or smut in cliques, who believed in youth and did not gloze the unpleasant consequences of age. What is life, one said, or what is pleasant once you have turned the page of love? The days grow worse, the dice are loaded against the living man who pays in tears for breath. Never to be born was the best, call no man happy, this side death. Conscious, long before Engels, of necessity and therein free, they plotted out their life with truism and humour between the jealous heaven and the callous sea. And Pindar sang the garland of wild olive, and Alcibiades lived from hand to mouth, double-crossing Athens, Persia, Sparta, and many died in the city of plague, and many of drought in Sicilian quarries, and many by the spear and arrow, and many more who told their lies too late, caught in the eternal factions and reactions of the city-state. And free speech shivered on the pikes of Macedonia, and later on the swords of Rome, and Athens became a mere university city, and the goddess born of the foam became the kept Hetaira, heroine of Menander, and the philosopher narrowed his focus, confined his efforts to putting his own soul in order, and keeping a quiet mind. And for 1,000 years they went on talking, making such apt remarks, a race no longer of heroes, but of professors and crooked businessmen, and secretaries and clerks who turned out dapper little elegiac verses on the ironies of fate, the transience of all affections, carefully shunning an overstatement, but working the dying fall. The glory that was Greece, put it in a syllabus, grade it page by page to train the mind, or even to point a moral for the present age. Models of logic and lucidity, dignity, sanity, the golden mean between opposing ills. Though there were exceptions, of course, but only exceptions, the bloody bacchanals on the Thracian hills. So the humanist in his room with Jacobean panels, chewing his pipe and looking on a lazy quad, chops the ancient world to turn a sermon to the greater glory of God. But I can do nothing so useful or so simple. These dead are dead, and when I should remember the paragons of Hellas, I think instead of the crooks, the adventurers, the opportunists, the careless athletes and the fancy boys, the hair-splitters, the pedants, the hard-boiled skeptics, and the agora, and the noise of the demagogues and the quacks, and the woman pouring libations over graves, and the trimmers at Delphi and the dummies at Sparta, and lastly, I think of the slaves. And how one can imagine oneself among them, I do not know. It was all so unimaginably different, and all so long ago.